Imagine trying to survive minus 40 degrees in a metal box. Your car engine is off, your windows are, completely frozen on the inside, and if you turn on a portable heater...
You risk carbon monoxide poisoning.
Exactly. And tonight, in Alaska, over 800 school children are going to sleep exactly like this.
It's just devastating.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dives, everybody. We are exploring the reality that homelessness in America it's not a monolith. It varies wildly depending on where you are. And that is exactly why we're doing the Perfectly Homeless State Scorecard series.
Right, because geography matters. It matters a lot.
So much. Today, we're pointing our compass north, like way north, to build a scorecard for Alaska. And the rules for this series, if you're new here, they're simple. We're building an evolving scorecard in real time to capture the actual lived reality and the systems of homelessness in this state.
Not just rattling off the statistics, we're looking at what it actually means on the ground.
Exactly. The score will shift dynamically throughout our analysis based on 6 different categories. Okay. And we won't reveal the final grade until the very end. So don't skip ahead.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
But, setting the scene for Alaska is absolutely critical here, because this isn't just another state. We are dealing with a subarctic margin.
Which changes everything.
Completely. We're talking about one of the most hostile landscapes for unhoused populations in the Western Hemisphere. The numbers this year, they're up 37%.
Wow. 37% in 1 year.
Yeah, hitting a 13-year high of over 2,686 people.
Right.
But, the real shocker isn't the total number. It's who is actually out there.
Right, because I think the assumption for a lot of people is usually that this population consists mostly of, single, chronically unhoused men. But looking at the ground truth, that's not the full picture at all, is it?
Not even close. I mean, statewide, over 600 of those individuals are people in families with children. We have over 500 people who are chronically homeless and over 100 seniors.
100 seniors sleeping out in that cold. That's hard to hear.
It is. And there's also a massive disproportionate crisis hitting Alaska Natives. They make up about 20% of the state's general population, right? But they account for half of all shelter clients.
Half? Wow.
Yeah. And while a lot of this is heavily concentrated right in the municipality of Anchorage, it's spilling out rapidly into rural hubs, places like the Mat-Su Valley.
Which brings us back to those 800 kids I mentioned at the top. 800 kids in the Mat-Su Valley alone, sleeping in cars, in tents, on couches, or literally in cardboard boxes.
Yeah, the cascading effects of that are just staggering.
You think about, school attendance, the constant risk of frostbite, and the absolute terror those families must feel about Child Protective Services getting involved simply because they can't find a warm room.
Right, because poverty gets punished.
It does. It all points back to the math, really. Every crisis starts with the math. So let's jump into our first category, housing affordability. What does it actually cost to keep a roof over your head in Alaska?
Well, the economic displacement happening up there is intense. To afford a basic, 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent, an individual needs to earn $26.32 an hour.
So that's over, $55,000 a year?
Roughly, yeah. If you are making minimum wage, you would need to work 2.5 full-time jobs just to afford that basic apartment. The math simply does not align with the reality of wages.
I was looking at the notes from Covenant House in Anchorage, and they pointed out a startling detail about how fast this escalated. Just a year or two ago, a 1-bedroom apartment in Anchorage was around $1,000 a month. Today, it's $1,500.
A 50% increase in 24 months.
It's like a brutal game of musical chairs. Imagine the state just removed 14,000 chairs from the game, because that is the current estimated housing deficit, 14,000 units just missing.
Yep. They just don't exist.
You can play by all the rules, work a full-time job, and still end up living in your car because the chair you could afford is just gone.
And the cruel irony of those missing units is that employed people are now terrified of their coworkers finding out. We're seeing a huge rise in the quote-unquote working homeless.
People who have steady jobs but are forced to shower at local gyms.
Exactly. They meticulously hide their housing status to avoid professional stigma, all while sleeping in their vehicles because the inventory literally just doesn't exist.
Okay, so based on this massive affordability gap, this severely lowers the overall picture for the state. The current draft score starts deep in the red.
Yeah, that's definitely a rough start for Category 1.
Right, because if the housing math is impossible, these people literally have nowhere to vanish to when the weather turns. Which brings us to Category 2, shelter access. What happens when winter hits and you need emergency shelter?
This is where that subarctic reality sets in with a really devastating consequences. Recently, the mass emergency shelter at Anchorage's Sullivan Arena closed.
And there was a huge facility, right?
Yeah, massive. When it closed, hundreds of people were forced to just scramble for cover. The direct result of that, a record 49 outdoor exposure deaths in Anchorage in a single year. That was double the number from the year prior.
Wait, for you listening who might not know the shelter system well, why couldn't those hundreds of people just walk into another facility? I mean, surely there are other shelters.
Well, because of severe systemic bottlenecks. The primary low-barrier shelter on East 56th Avenue, for example, it runs at 97% capacity year-round. Turnaways happen daily.
And just to clarify for everyone, low barrier means they don't require, a clean background check, perfect sobriety, or force you to give up your pets to get a bed.
Precisely, which explains exactly why it's constantly at maximum capacity. It's one of the only options that takes people exactly as they are.
Right.
High barrier shelters might have a few open beds, but if you have a dog or a partner you weren't legally married to or, an addiction issue, you just can't get in.
And outside of Anchorage, I imagine it gets even bleaker.
Oh, absolutely. The Matsu Valley, where we mentioned those 800 kids, they have zero traditional shelters. None. They rely entirely on nonprofits like Family Promise to temporarily shelter families in churches.
And when we talk about exposure in Alaska, we really need to understand what an Alaskan winter storm actually looks like. Like in November, a massive storm dropped 2 feet of snow in 48 hours.
2 feet, just imagine that.
Yeah, and city buses stopped running entirely. And here's a crucial piece of the puzzle you might not realize. For the unhoused, a city bus isn't just transportation. It is a mobile warming shelter.
It's survival.
Exactly. You pay a fare, and you get an hour of indoor heated survival. When the buses stopped during that storm, people were completely stranded outside. That single week saw 4 exposure deaths.
Because without that transit, without that temporary indoor heat, the environment becomes immediately lethal. Like when a city shuts down for a snow day, housed people make hot chocolate. Unhoused people freeze to death.
That is a stark way to put it, but it's true.
So this lack of life-saving infrastructure shifts the score even lower. Based on this, the current draft score is just plummeting.
Yeah. If we pause right here for our midpoint score moment and look at our preliminary score overlay, Alaska is deeply in the red. We are solidly hovering in F territory right now.
It's not looking good.
But remember, if you're tracking this with us, a scorecard evaluates the whole system, not just the deficits. This is explicitly an evolving draft score. We need to look how the state is fighting back or, in some cases, how the state is reacting to the people caught in the crossfire.
Right. The first 2 parts of our analysis dealt with the structural deficit. Now we have to evaluate the systemic reaction to that deficit because the enforcement landscape is becoming increasingly punitive.
Which leads us into category 3, criminalization and enforcement. So if the shelters are full and a 2-bedroom apartment requires a $55K salary, these people literally have nowhere to vanish to, which puts them right in the crosshairs of law enforcement. How does the state treat you when you're just trying to exist outside?
Let's look at Anchorage's proposed AO 2025-74. This is an ordinance that would make public land camping a Class B misdemeanor.
Okay, what does that actually mean for the person in the tent?
It carries a penalty of up to a $2,000 fine and 6 months in jail. Crucially, it allows police to bypass traditional notice periods, meaning they don't have to give days of warning, and they can immediately clear encampments if they are near schools, trails, or high-speed roads.
Wait, 6 months in jail for sleeping outside when the low-barrier shelters are already at 97% capacity. How does that math work from a city planning perspective? You're basically guaranteeing that the jail becomes the overflow shelter.
Well, the logic from a municipal standpoint is often about rapid hazard mitigation. City officials argue they need the legal authority to immediately dismantle camps that pose, imminent public health risks.
Like what?
Like fires near high-speed roads or biohazards near schools without waiting through a lengthy legal appeals process.
And we need to be very clear to you listening. The ACLU of Alaska is actively litigating this. Their core argument is that this criminalizes poverty, basically punishing people for existing outside when the city cannot provide an indoor alternative.
It's a massive point of contention.
And just to remind everyone, we are not taking sides on this political debate. We are simply reporting the legal tug-of-war happening on the ground. But the tension there is undeniable. You have city officials trying to keep public spaces safe and advocates pointing out that the people being cleared have nowhere else to go.
It is a massive tension point. And it's not just Anchorage, by the way. At the state level, the Department of Transportation has a 3-tier risk policy for clearing highway encampments, which allows for rapid clearances if an encampment is deemed an imminent danger.
And what about other cities?
Down in Juneau, they've proposed classifying survival camping on sidewalks or in parking garages as disorderly conduct.
Disorderly conduct. Why that specific charge?
Because that classification is powerful. It allows for immediate arrest, completely bypassing the complex, time-consuming trespassing procedures.
Wow. So you're faced with jail time or massive fines for sleeping in a tent, but you have no indoor options. Because the response leans heavily into punitive measures when alternatives are scarce, this lowers the overall picture even further.
Yeah, that score keeps taking hits.
It does. But if you're dodging fines and dodging the cold, it makes total sense why so many people retreat into their vehicles. Which brings us to category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness. This is a very specific type of unsheltered survival, isn't it?
It really is. In Alaska, a vehicle isn't just transportation. It functions as a lifeboat. Unhoused people actually prioritize keeping their vehicles over entering traditional shelters.
Really, even in that cold?
Yes. Vehicles offer lockable storage, physical security from assault, and crucially, they allow people to keep their pets and partners together.
But a car has zero insulation once the engine is off. I mean, you can call it a lifeboat, but how do you actually survive minus 40 degrees in a metal box without freezing to death overnight?
It is a thermodynamic nightmare, honestly, and people are forced to make impossible, deadly choices. A common method is using unvented propane heaters, like buddy heaters, but these create what's known as wet heat.
Wet heat? What does that do in a car?
The combustion process releases massive amounts of water vapor. In a freezing car, that condensation immediately turns to ice on the inside of the windows and metal panels. Worse, the moisture seeps into your sleeping bag and freezes from the inside out, completely destroying the insulation.
Oh man, so your own body heat betrays you.
Exactly. Plus, you have the extreme, constant risk of carbon monoxide poisoning.
What about those vented diesel heaters? You see van lifers on social media using those all the time to stay warm in the winter.
Those create dry heat and exhaust the dangerous fumes outside, which is incredibly safe and effective. But they require expensive lithium battery banks, tools, and complex installations.
Right, if you are living in your car because you lost your minimum wage job and can't make rent, you obviously can't afford a $500 custom heater setup.
Exactly. So people resort to absolute desperation. Covenant House reported finding a terrified youth who parked outside their building, running an extension cord through the snow to an exterior outlet just to run a cheap electric space heater inside the car.
That is so dangerous.
Outreach workers had to intervene because the kid was at risk of accidentally blowing themselves up or starting an electrical fire just trying to make it to morning.
That is terrifying. And let's talk about where they are parking these lifeboats, because the municipalities have tried to address this, right?
Yeah.
There is this massive safe parking paradox in Anchorage.
Yes. Anchorage created a designated safe parking program. On paper, it sounds like a perfect solution. A legal, designated place to park overnight with restrooms, security, and connections to caseworkers.
But when you look at the fine print, the paradox is just glaring. The program is only open from April to October. It closes exactly when winter hits, and the weather actually becomes lethal.
Yeah, the timing is baffling.
On top of that, the sites are limited to just 25 cars. And to get in, you need a valid driver's license, current registration, and active insurance. It's like creating a lifeboat, but strictly requiring a VIP pass, a pristine credit score, and you can only use it in the summer when the water is warm.
Right. And if you don't have that VIP pass, you fall into what advocates call the impoundment trap.
Tell me about that.
When your vehicle is parked illegally, say, breaking a 24-hour limit on a side street or blocking a winter snowplow route, you get a ticket. If you can't pay it, your car gets towed. For a housed person, towing a vehicle is an expensive inconvenience. For an unhoused person, an impoundment is an instant, catastrophic eviction.
Yeah, there was a story in the source material about a man named Mike Poirier. He was a mechanic from the Matsu Valley living in a Toyota Camry with his wife. Police cleared the camp where he was parked, physically pulled him from the car, handcuffed him, and impounded the Camry.
Heartbreaking.
In 5 minutes, they didn't just lose their car. The cascading loss is what's devastating. They lost their shelter, their sub-zero sleeping bags, their cold weather gear, their medications, their personal documents. Everything they needed to survive the night was towed away to a municipal lot.
And because the daily storage fees and retrieval costs usually total more than an old Camry is even worth, they can never get it back. They are permanently relegated to the street. So this labyrinth of red tape and the impoundment trap shifts the score significantly downward.
This is painting an incredibly bleak picture. But we have to look at what the people on the ground are actually doing to fight this, because there are bright spots. Let's move to category 5, outreach and social services.
There is incredible, heroic community resilience in Alaska. Let's look at how they are actually tracking the data first. The Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness drastically improved their point-in-time count.
How did they do that?
Historically, cities just send untrained volunteers out at midnight to stumble around looking for tents in the dark. Anchorage switched to multi-day observation methods using highly trained outreach professionals.
Which is brilliant because an outreach professional isn't just ticking a box on a clipboard. They know the terrain, they know the people, and they're using that count as an opportunity to actually connect someone with a caseworker right then and there.
Exactly. They are using data collection as an active rescue mission. And in the Mat-Su Valley, they have an incredible initiative called Project Homeless Connect. It's a massive one-stop shop event held in January. They bring dozens of agencies under one roof at a local sports center.
The logistics of that are amazing. You walk in out of the cold and you can get a hot meal, winter gear, a haircut, and public health screenings. But I think the most vital part is the administrative help.
Oh, for sure. The IDs.
Right. They help people get state IDs or fill out employment forms. The cascading effects of just getting your replacement ID are massive. You can't apply for a job, get a bank account, or enter certain shelters without one. Mat-Su even hosts an awareness event called Cardboard City, where community members actually sleep outside in cardboard boxes to raise money for families facing homelessness.
It's a highly effective way to bypass the bureaucratic maze that usually keeps people trapped. And you mentioned Covenant House earlier. They don't just wait for kids to show up at their doors. They have dedicated outreach teams actively walking into known frozen encampments in the dead of winter.
Wow.
Yeah, they are intentionally seeking out unhoused youth to offer them unconditional support, hot meals, and a spot in one of their 25 emergency overflow beds.
That boots-on-the-ground community effort is a major strength. Knowing there are people actively walking into the freezing dark to find you raises the overall picture and pulls our draft score up from the absolute bottom.
Definitely a bright spot.
But outreach is just catching people who are falling. What about stopping the fall entirely? We need to look at the systemic long-term solutions. Let's look at category 6, pathways to permanent housing.
This is where we look for brick-and-mortar solutions. In Anchorage, they have the Anchored Home Plan, and they actually found a highly innovative way to fund it. A new alcohol tax that was implemented in 2021.
An alcohol tax is a fascinating lever to pull because it targets a widespread public health issue to fund a critical housing issue. I'm guessing that money is going directly into development and renovation rather than just administrative overhead.
That's right. The municipality has taken the revenue from that tax and made targeted grants to nonprofits to purchase and completely renovate 15 different facilities. This initiative alone has created over 600 new units of housing.
That's real progress.
It is. They are also funding a homeless to stably housed project, which brought a brand new complex care shelter and a navigation center online. It's a concrete physical investment in getting people indoors.
600 units is a phenomenal start. But here's the caveat we have to acknowledge to keep the scale accurate. The state still needs those 14,000 units we talked about at the beginning. 600 units is a drop in a very large bucket.
Yeah, the math is still very unbalanced.
And the advocates on the ground are strongly pushing for a shift in how those future units are built. They don't want to return to mass arenas where hundreds of people are crammed together on cots. They are advocating for year-round, dispersed, neighborhood-integrated low-barrier shelters that actually allow people to bring their pets and stay with their partners.
The scale of the city's response hasn't matched the sheer scale of the deficit yet, but the financial mechanism and the blueprint are finally there. So these concrete, funded steps toward permanent housing shift the score upward in our final category.
All right, we've walked through the entire reality on the ground, analyzing all 6 categories of the Perfectly Homeless State Scorecard for Alaska. Let's do a rapid summary of what we've learned before we reveal the final grade.
Right. The strengths of Alaska's system are clear. The state benefits from heroic, community-driven outreach that literally saves lives in the snow. And they are utilizing highly innovative funding mechanisms like the alcohol tax to physically build new, permanent housing units.
The weaknesses.
But the weaknesses are severe and systemic. We are looking at brutal economic barriers where minimum wage doesn't come close to rent, a deadly winter environment, a profound lack of low-barrier shelter space, and a paradoxical, highly punitive legal approach to people trying to survive in their vehicles.
Okay, let's read off the rapid-fire letter grades for the scorecard. Ready? Housing affordability.
That's an F.
Shelter access.
D-.
Criminalization and enforcement.
Another F.
Vehicle dwelling friendliness.
Solid D.
Outreach and social services.
A strong B+.
And finally, pathways to permanent housing.
That gets a C.
Which brings us to the final overall perfectly homeless state score for Alaska. Drumroll, please. The final grade is a D-.
And to briefly explain that grade, while the community outreach we discussed is genuinely heroic, the systemic economic forces and the penal structures in place make mere survival a daily, deadly struggle. You simply cannot outreach your way out of a 14,000-unit housing deficit while simultaneously criminalizing the people who can't find a home. The math has to change.
That is the harsh reality on the ground. And that wraps up our scorecard for Alaska. We highly invite you to check out the other deep dives in the Perfectly Homeless State Scorecard series to see how different regions are tackling or failing to tackle this national crisis. Every state has a different approach, a different climate, and a different legal framework. Understanding those differences is the first step to figuring out what actually works.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought straight from the material we analyzed today. Consider this. In our bureaucratic system, a vehicle is often legally classified as a liquid asset. Yeah. That means owning the very car you sleep in, your only refuge from a subarctic blizzard, can legally disqualify you from receiving food assistance or housing vouchers because you appear too wealthy on paper. If our safety nets require you to surrender your only means of physical survival just to prove you are poor enough to deserve help, are these systems designed to end poverty or simply to trap you in it?
Perfectly homeless is more than a phrase. It's a perspective. If you'd like to support our channel and help us keep exploring these vital topics, click on over to the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store. Pick up a warm hoodie with our logo and support the channel. Perfectly Homeless is a brand built from real life and real lessons. Wear the message of freedom and support the Perfectly Homeless mission.